This is a responsible and imaginative budget which should promote growth, exports and investment. It ought to be widely welcomed by the business community. We applaud strengthening the link between savers and business investments through changes to ISAs and pensions. It has the potential to bring profound change, shifting our culture from one based on debt to one based on savings. Support for Britain's exporters is particularly welcome. Increased capital allowances and changes to the airline passenger duty were both called for by the IOD, and they'll benefit a wide range of British business. So will measures to tackle energy costs. While we do support the increase in personal income tax allowances, we are disappointed that more and more workers are being dragged into the 40% income tax band, as the Chancellor has failed to raise the higher tax threshold by any meaningful amount, but perhaps next year.
Well, this is very welcome news that the personal tax allowance is going up to £10,500 from the tax year after the one that's just about to start. But I think we're disappointed that despite a lot of representations, including in the press and indeed representations the IOD made specifically to the Chancellor, he's not addressed this issue of more and more people being drawn into the 40% tax bracket. By comparison, the US tax rate for these people is 25%, and even in highly taxed France, it's 30%. So hopefully we'll hear a little bit of improvement for this group of people when we get to the autumn statement and the manifestos of the political parties leading up to the general election next year. The doubling of the annual investment allowance is a very important step in our view, because now the limit for 100% relief is £500,000 of expenditure. It means it's going to be of significant value not only to the smaller businesses and startups, but also of value to the medium-sized businesses, which have been neglected in most recent budgets, both by the coalition government and its Labour predecessor.
Well, these are some of the most significant changes that we've seen in decades to the thing that we understand as a pension today. And we know from research amongst our members that people have really disliked the requirement to buy an annuity. Now, subject to legislation that goes through next year, that requirement will disappear. People will be able to access their pensions in whatever amount they want, whenever they want, without restriction. This has got to be incredibly good news, and certainly is a reform that we've looked for and argued for some time.
Air passenger duty is a very interesting area of the budget, because whilst it would be easy to think that air passenger duty just affected the airline industry and a number of long-haul carriers, by the Chancellor scrapping the two highest rates for long-haul journeys, it also puts UK airports and businesses associated with those airports in a much better competitive position with the likes of Schiphol and Frankfurt, which have lower duties on long-haul flights. So I think the Chancellor has very clearly here tried to make sure that the UK has a tax-friendly business environment, and that he takes note of the favourable tax reliefs introduced in competing countries so that the UK isn't bypassed for business investment. The final point I'd make concerns tax avoidance and tax abuse. Over the recent years, there have been a number of aggressive avoidance schemes marketed, often by niche or bureaus focused on selling these schemes. More often than not, the schemes have failed in the courts, but people have been enticed to enter into them on the basis of the late payment of tax, because sometimes even if the view was taken that even if the tax has ultimately to be paid, the money has been left in the taxpayer's hands in the meantime. The changes announced by the Chancellor are that the tax is going to need to be paid up front and recovered by the taxpayer if ultimately the aggressive planning is successful in the courts. In fact, the tax will be repaid with interest. I think this will be a very important area over in tax law in coming years, because I think it will become much more difficult for many of these frankly unsound tax proposals to be successfully marketed.